Sorry, there'll be another one. Sorry. Are we on?
You're on now.
All right, cool. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Melbourne CocoaHeads number 160. I'm Baz, and I'm going to be the MC for this evening. Tonight, we have Renaud talking about the journey of a task. We have Luke talking about continuous delivery at ANZ, and we have Fletch giving us a recap of NS Spain. But first, in the spirit of reconciliation, Melbourne CocoaHeads acknowledges the traditional custodians of the country throughout Australia and the connections to land, sea and community. We pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging, and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples today. A bit of health and safety, first of all. If you're looking for toilets, they're out past the lifts where you came in, and go past there and turn right. And the emergency exit is also by the lifts. This meetup is governed by the CocoaHeads Code of Conduct. If you're being harassed or you notice that someone is in an uncomfortable situation or have any other concerns, please get in touch either in person to an organiser, by email, or you can use an anonymous form that we have online at the website. And you can find more details and the Code of Conduct on the website. If you see someone with a dot on their name tag, a red dot means they're an organiser, and a blue dot means it's their first time here. So you can be nice to the blue dot people, less nice to the red dot people. Questions for the evening? Please don't shout questions out during the presentation, no matter how tempting that might be. Save it, stick it in Slack, or ask it at the end of the presentation. That will help the evening flow better, and it allows audiences online and in person to both participate equally. None of this is possible without our sponsors. Our gold sponsor is Itty Bitty Apps, and Dias and Deloitte are our silver sponsors. Go for photos. Other events to not miss. The monthly drinks night, which is the last Tuesday of the month, will be on the 25th of October, probably at Penny Blue, but check Slack and Meetup for details of that near the time. And exciting news this month, the Hack Night is coming back for the first time in, I don't know, maybe 3 years, at least 2 years, I think. So this is a combined CocoaHeads and Android GDG Hack Night. And it's going to be here, which is a change of venue since before. That's going to be next week, next Wednesday, the 19th. Even more meetups. Our friends at Sydney CocoaHeads, which I think is usually next week for their meetup. So check them out. Also check out GDG Melbourne for some Google and Android goodness, and the web meetup if you want some web goodness. You can find us online at melbournecocoaheads.com. We have a Slack channel which you can get to from the website, and Melbourne Coco on Twitter. Once you're in the Slack channel, something just changed with the audio. You all right? Just sounded different. When you're in the Slack, here's some interesting channels that you might like to join. I actually forgot to ask if anyone has shipped any apps this month, so if anyone has, give me a shout. No one shipped anything. Okay, I should have asked in the Slack. I didn't, so if you've shipped any apps, stick it in the Slack channel and publicize those to people. Or tell whoever's doing this next month and they will give you a proper shout out. So tonight, we will start with Renaud, who is going to talk to us about the journey of a task. Over to you.
Okay, so I've got this fancy title because I was asked to provide a title. So alternative titles were A Game of Threads or A Song of Asyncs and Awaits. I'm Renaud, for those who don't know me. I'm currently the iOS lead at Drawboard. We do PDF editors mostly, apps around that, and yeah, we very much care about concurrency. We very much care about these things because a PDF editor needs to be very responsive, and so we try to do a lot of I/O and asynchronous work so that the experience of users is as good as possible. So we care about Swift structural concurrency, which is a really neat technology that shipped in the last couple of years that everybody's probably pretty familiar with right now. So I want to do a survey first of all. Who is currently shipping any production code with Swift structural concurrency right now in the room? I know there's not many people because it's raining hard, but okay, Amy is the only one, I guess. Do I see anyone else? So it's like, yeah, it's surprising. I would have thought that maybe a few more people would have lifted their hands, but we only have one person. But yeah, it's.
I use just threads, dispatch queue, nothing more than that. Is
Yeah.
this a special package? I just use dispatch queue. I'm quite happy about that.
Yeah, that's GCD, right? But Swift structural concurrency is a new task and async await syntax that shipped like last year. And so it's been adopted, I guess, slowly by the community, even though it's pretty mature already, I can tell you already. And that's not what the talk is about. But anyway, another question is like, who has experimented with it? So not necessarily ship anything with it, but yeah, you've dabbled with it, you've played with it, you have experimented with it, which is good. And then who is planning to use it in the future? And yeah, like, I mean, I expect the whole room to leave their hands. It's pretty much like becoming universal. It's a fundamental thing, technology to use in the future, hopefully. But yeah, like people need to obviously get familiar with it and know as well the pitfalls. And tonight I'm going to talk about one of the pitfalls. But before that, let's just introduce a few things, right? So obviously we all know about async await syntax. It's a new syntax, new keywords. It makes writing asynchronous code very easy to write and read. It's really great, but I'm not talking about that, right? What I mean is that Swift structural concurrency, if you think about it, first of all, it's a low-cost abstraction for asynchronous work. It's not a zero-cost abstraction because it's impossible to do zero-cost abstractions for asynchronous work, but it's a low-cost abstraction. There's both the language that comes with it, but there's a runtime that is hidden from everything, right? But we have to remember that there's a cost to Swift structural concurrency. And because Swift structural concurrency has a lot of syllables and already I'm struggling, I'm going to refer to it as SSC from now on. So if I say SSC, that means that. And something to understand as well is that the implicit goal of SSC is to encourage you to use asynchronous paradigms and to maximize the use of threads and CPU cores and all of these things, right? So because the syntax is so much easier to use, the result should be that more work is being done on more threads, and therefore all the nice cores that Apple is selling are used in a better way, rather than having everything run off the main thread. So that's an implicit goal. They say it in some ways, but it's something to really understand about SSC beyond just the nice syntax. But obviously, running code concurrently is very tricky and dangerous. Like we probably are all aware that there's lots of problems with it and dangerous things. And so thankfully the language and the compiler are full of helpful diagnostics and is able to catch most of the common errors that SSC can introduce with your code. It's not perfect yet. I'm sure Swift 6 is going to have more warnings down the line, but already it's getting pretty good, obviously. So SSC is more than just async await. It is a package of goals and technologies that make a whole thing. It's not just a language and some fancy keywords. So it's important to understand. But now going back to who we are mostly iOS app developers, I'm sure. And what we really care about most of the time is really just this thing. Is my app running on the main thread or not, right? Sometimes we really care about being on the main thread because we, for example, want to update some UI properties, and if we don't, then we're going to be yelled at by the debugger, hopefully, or things are not going to work. But likewise, sometimes we want to make sure we don't run on the main thread because we do some AVIO, and we want the UI to remain responsive. So that's most of our our thought process when we start using concurrency and thinking in a concurrent way. That's really the problem that we're trying to solve. So in the olden days, this is what we did, right? We just had the old nice syntax with a closure. We have an async call that has some kind of completion handler that is invoked when that is, when the work is complete, giving you some kind of result. And you can do something with that result, but we're all familiar with the fact that this is kind of brittle. We don't know anything, looking at that code, we don't know anything about that callback. We don't know if it's invoked on the main thread. We don't know if it's invoked on a background thread. We don't know if it's invoked on a concurrent queue at all. There is no context whatsoever. And that's been the problem for eons, right? Like we all seen that kind of code, some framework that doesn't really have any context as to where this code is supposed to execute. And hopefully, either there is a comment somewhere or an initializer that takes a queue or something like that, at the very least, like a comment that indicates, by the way, I'm going to call you on that kind of queue, so that's what you can expect. But we only know so many frameworks that do that. Most frameworks actually don't even bother to tell you. It's up to you to figure out, oh, by the way, it's firing off on some random queue I don't have no idea about. But it's really hard to reason just looking at that, where this code executes, or at least that callback executes. So we're all familiar with what we tend to do, which is we just dispatch async to the main queue, right? Like you've done that tens, hundreds, thousands of times, and this is just like not good. This is the, like I said, this is the olden days. This should not happen anymore. I hate that. I hate that from the start. And this has a name, right? This is called defensive programming, and defensive programming is the root of all evil on the world. I hate it. This is one of the worst anti-patterns you can ever have. But it exposes really a lack of confidence in your code. You don't know what your code does. You don't know what it executes. So you're just trying something which feels safer, but there's no explanation as to why or how things happen that way. And really, like, it has other drawbacks, like it degrades debuggability because you're dispatching to another queue. Even if you're already on the main queue, right, you might lose your stack frame because you just dispatch and now you have a new stack frame to run that code again. And so you just degraded debuggability if you ever have to investigate that code. It may result in UI flickers, for example, where if you dispatch things too much, at some point we're familiar with the fact that the data might be cached, the data might be available, but then eventually because we dispatch things too many times, the UI loads up after 50 milliseconds and suddenly your view controller just like shoves something and it looks like it flickers. But overall, it's just noise. It's just busy work. It's just annoying. It is not code that anybody, I'm sure, enjoys to work with or to write. It feels wrong, and it is wrong. So moving beyond that, again, I'm just going to introduce some conventions for the next slides. If you're familiar with the Swift Structure Concurrency SSC talks at DubDub, they refer to basically this term. So there's a main thread, obviously, that I'm going to refer with the palette emoji. There's a sea of concurrency, which is basically a pool of background threads on which code can execute, right? There's a pool managed by the runtime of SSC, and code can execute on that sea of concurrency. And there's actors, which are islands of serialization. So that island refers to an actor. So I'm going to use these emojis in the next few slides. Okay, so now we have SSC. I'm not going to introduce the syntax. We're all familiar with it. There's async, await. There's a bunch of structures. I'm assuming that you're all familiar with it. And so we write this. Like, I'm creating a task, and I want to do the thing, and I should be completely aware of where that code executes, right? Where my interrogation marks are, I should know where that executes. So can anybody tell me where that first comment executes and where that last comment executes? Does anybody have any idea? Where, on which thread, basically, that executes? Anybody want to guess? Anybody want to try?
No guarantee.
I got a shrug from Amy. And I got
Your top one's going to be an inherited thread, like the
so the top one is going to be an inherited thread.
One's not guaranteed.
So bottom one is not guaranteed.
Because if you say away, means the current thread got blocked, and you can't do it in the main thread. Therefore, I assume it's done from the background thread.
Okay, so I think basically we all agree to disagree, which is bad, right? Like that's the problem. And the reason really, like Amy, I think is right, is that we have insufficient context. We cannot infer where we're running at this point. we have the same problem as before, actually. SSC doesn't solve that problem until, actually, you write it like that. And again, we're familiar with that. Now we have a context in which that asynchronous closure executes, which has been a scope, basically, which has been attributed with the main actor attribute. And we're pretty familiar with it, hopefully. And basically, the Swift compiler will now inject specific code to ensure that these lines of code with the comments execute on the main thread, right? Like the main actor attribute will tell the compiler that any asynchronous closure in that same scope, whether it's method functions or closures in that scope, will execute on the main thread. And now we actually have a guarantee, thanks to that, that this will actually run on the main thread, which is great. We have solved that problem. We have tagged. That's exactly what the @main_actor tag, whatever you want to call it, attribute is for. We hopefully all know that. That works great. That now we have a guarantee just by looking at the file and by looking at the header on top, especially with Xcode 14. You can see now with the nice header, scrolling header thing, you can really see the main actor all the time as you look at that thing. And something to know as well is that a lot of classes from Apple frameworks have been tagged with @main_actor. For example, let's just consider one of the main ones is UI view controller. And this attribute is inherited by subclasses. So if you subclass UI view controller, all of your async methods inside your subclass of UI view controller will run on the main actor. It is a guarantee as well. You don't have to repeat it, which is nice. So every single UI class that you write async code with will implicitly have that @main_actor guarantee. It's really great, and we love it, and I'm sure you probably are fairly familiar with that aspect, and that's one of the great advantages of SSC. But there's other syntax, and I forgot to update that slide. The thread means a color palette. I forgot. I use that as a previous emoji, so think of it as a color palette. But basically, you can tag a task closure with @main_actor in, and that will execute that single closure on the main actor. You can tag the function, the method on the class myClass, just this method as @main_actor, and only this method will execute on the main actor, and the rest will execute who knows where. And then obviously the last syntax, which is that the main actor is tagged on the class. But again, like the attribute applies to the scope. So you just go down, and whatever is in that scope has that attribute inherited. The compiler looks at that file and can generate the proper code so that it guarantees that code will run on the main actor. Okay, so now next problem. So again, can you tell me where the first line and the last line execute? So now we're in a class, and yeah, so same problem. It's an async function. Where does that execute? Anybody want to guess?
Background thread, because you have async code.
So you're saying a background thread because it has async code. It's a pretty good guess. Anybody wants to?
It's tagged async, so
It's tagged async, so
it's assumed somewhere, some random background.
somewhere some random background thread. Well, the answer is again insufficient context. And this time it's not about any kind of like attribute that you look in the file. What really matters, and that's what this talk is all about, that's the big reveal now, is that what you need to know actually is the compiler version. These changes depending on the Swift compiler version. So really, the answer is that in Swift, before 5.7, so basically any version below or equal to 5.6, the first line and the last line could execute anywhere. There is no guarantee, there is no determinicity. Basically, the first line will execute on whatever executor context the function is called with. So if that function is called by the main actor, you will execute on the main actor. If you are called by something on the C of concurrency, you will execute on the C of concurrency. If you call by an actor, you will be on that actor executor context. The last line will, again, there's no determinicity because it will run in whatever executor context the do the thing method has returned with. So if do the thing switches context and does something on another actor or whatever, you will then inherit, you will continue executing on whatever was the last executor context of that function. And so it could be whatever. And that's pretty bad again. There is no determinicity. And the worst thing is that this can introduce some very nasty bugs where let's imagine that do the thing 99% of the time does its work on the main actor, and you test it, you're developing it, everything works fine, you're testing it, you're shipping it to prod, but it happens that 1% of the time do the thing actually has to do something on a background thread because, oh, a cache is not hit and actually has to do some network I/O. Now you're doing that work that you expected to happen on the main thread because that's what happened when you were developing it. Actually happened on that background thread. Now you have a bug on production that you can't understand, that is hard to debug. So this is a terrible state of this terrible state of things. We don't want that. We don't want undeterminicity. This is really nasty, and this has beaten me. This has beaten other people on the field. You've seen probably plenty of blog posts talking about that problem. And if you write any SSC code using Swift 5.6 or earlier, you will get beaten by that bug. So I'm warning you very much to, at the very least, use Xcode 14 if you can, because I'm going to get to that. But also there's another problem before we get even to that, right? Like, let's say again, I'm going to do some heavy computation, and I don't want that computation to happen on the main thread. So what do I do? Like, what do I do if I don't want to execute on main thread? Like, does anybody know in SSC, how do I do it so that, okay, I know that I'm kind of coming from the main thread. What should I do in order to make that computation somewhere else? Anybody know? The answer is not insufficient context.
Yes, maybe you can provide a particular queue to the type
So,
part of its initializer.
no. So the answer is basically a pile of hacks. And so the real answer is really like, don't bother. Don't bother. It's impossible. Like, there's ways to do it, but it's so hacky that really there's no way. Like, you don't want to even try. And that's, again, bad, right? I want to start doing work of the main thread, but if I'm already coming from the main thread, there's no way for me to yield, really, and to go on another thread using SSC. With GCD, I could do that. With dispatching on another queue, with SSC, I cannot do that. And so now we're taking all of this together, right? We're packaging all of that, and this is really the payoff, is that you should read this Swift evolution proposal. I don't know if you are familiar with this specific number, but this is critical to work with SSC moving forward. It is a fairly small proposal. It can be read in like 2 or 3 minutes, but it is so important to read and to understand. Its title is Clarifies the Execution of Non-Actor Isolated Async Functions, which, what does that mean? So what it is, it's not really like a proposal like, oh, we're going to introduce new syntax or new keywords and then the language some way. So no. What it says, like, we messed up. That situation that I showed you before where we don't know where things execute is bad. Let's just give guarantees in the next version of Swift, which at the time was Swift 5.7, so that we know at any point where things will execute. It will be deterministic. So it's not really an addition to the language. It's more like an errata. It's like, oh, we messed up. Sorry, we're just going to fix that problem for you. It recognizes that the previous behavior I showed you, where we don't really know where things execute, it depends on who calls you and what you call and where it executes at any point in time. That has problems that is unpredictable, but also it can have overhangs. What if you're being called from an actor and you are doing heavy computation, like the main actor, and heavy computations, you are holding that actor back because you are holding that actor cannot process any other information while you're doing that computation. It's a problem they call overhang. You are grabbing that executor context for too long, and therefore concurrency is poor because you don't need to run on that actor queue, but you are doing it somehow because the runtime doesn't help you in that case. And that's bad for performance. That's bad for responsiveness and all of that. So the solution that they came up with is simple. It's like, always run non-actor functions on the generic executors, always. So if something is not in an actor or something tagged with main actor or whatever else global actor, it will always run in a sea of concurrency. That's it. That is now deterministic. It will always do that, which solves all of our problems. We know where it executes, and we have the main thread if we need to, unless we tag things by at main actor. If you think about it, one of the drawbacks of that policy, because we have so many context switches all the time, because if we're on the main actor, now we have to call a function which is not isolated. We have to switch even though we might not need to. It's a bit of like overhead every time we do that. So the drawback is potentially that there's going to be at runtime more switches between what they call executor contexts, which you can interpret as queues. So a lot more switches back and forth at runtime, which has obviously a cost, a CPU cost doing that all the time if it's too much. But to the advantage of like I said, that it still increases concurrency. So in the end, you might actually end up better because you are, again, spreading your work across multiple threads, multiple cores, which in the end might be a wash, even though you're spending more time switching between contexts. So I encourage, once again, I'm doing a poor job of summarizing it, but that's basically in the gist of it, that's what it says. It's like, we are making that trade-off of like, whenever you're not actor isolated, you're just going to run on the sea of concurrency, and that's it. And so now we have an answer to that problem, which is that starting with Swift 5.7, you have an async function in a, let's say, a class that is not an actor, that is not tagged with @main actor or anything like that. That function will always run in a sea of concurrency, whatever you are called from, or wherever you call from, or whatever do the thing does and returns from. It will always context switch, and you are guaranteed that it runs on a sea of concurrency. And that's great. I think that's great because guarantees in code are good. We like deterministic execution, right? I hope so. And yeah, like just to reemphasize things, it's all about local reasoning. To come back to things before of like, when you look at code, when you look at a class, you can now really, that's all the context you need to know where code executes, which thread it executes on. You don't have to like know the architecture of the app, know who calls you, know what you call, or anything like that, like we had to do before. All you have to do is look at that file, hopefully. If it's an extension, it's a bit complex, but and you can see everything you need to know. If it's a class, it will run in the sea of concurrency. If it's @main actor, it runs on the main actor. If it's an actor, it runs on its own executor context, which is serial. I mean, there's problems of reentrancy and all that, but I'm not gonna get into that, right? But yeah, it's all about local reasoning. Local reasoning is good. It removes a lot of the burden, intellectual burden of understanding code, understanding an application. You don't have to understand everything in order to work on a piece of code. It just declares itself in one file or one function. And that's pretty much it. That's the end. I just want to add two little blog posts that have been written in the last few days from Ole Begemann, which is pretty famous, I guess, in iOS development circles, who actually like has stumbled upon that exact same problem in the last couple of weeks, and has written blog posts about that, about like, I don't know where things execute and how are things on the main actor, and oh, by the way, this Xcode 13 has this behavior and Xcode 14, which ships with Swift 5.7, has this other behavior. And he's done the research, he's done a lot of like thorough investigating as to how the compiler works and the runtime works to enable this behavior. But even the best and brilliant minds in our community have been beat by this behavior. So my talk is a warning of like, the day you introduce Swift SSC in your code, the day you really embrace it, be mindful of this, and hopefully you're going to start with Swift 5.7, so you never have to think about it. But if you don't, then just understand that there's different behaviors between Xcode 14 and whatever Xcode version was before. At least that's the Swift compiler versions that come with it. But yeah, so, and it's, again, to just add a bit to my conclusion, it's a problem if you follow the Swift forums, which, fine. It's a constant source of problems on the Swift forums as well. Like half of the topics on the SSC that are SSC focused on Swift forums are about the same problem. Like people not knowing, like, I don't understand why things are executing on that specific thread. I don't understand how I can go and execute something of the main thread. So it's a lot of confusion about that specific problem. So that's why I made this talk, in order to spread the gospel of SE 338, because this says explicitly, like, moving forward, you don't have to worry too much about that, and you will be able to reason locally about where things execute, which down the line will hopefully help you write very responsive, performant apps without trying to wonder why things are like that. You will be able to understand, okay, I understand what the compiler and the runtime are doing, because that is how the code is written, which is how code should be. And that's it.
with your presentation. Okay, thank you. Let's back to start with your presentation.
Yep.
We have something we don't know which thread is running. We have to use this page queue main async something, even though it's not necessary because you are already in main thread. Right? Will this technology help in this case?
Well, I'm saying like I have a need to run on the main thread, let's say, right? If I know my example doesn't really show that, but if I have a need to execute something on the main thread, then my only way to really ensure it goes on the main thread is to dispatch async.
No, I'm not going to ensure that it goes to main thread. The problem is actually vice versa. As you started, we are already in main thread, but the code doesn't know whether we are in main thread or not. It says dispatch queue main async, while we don't need async. We just can you run the code as normally, right?
Maybe
That's
we don't know,
problem I
right?
have in
Looking at
my
that code,
code.
I'm reading that code.
How this SSC can help in this case? Will
Like-
it be smart enough to figure out we're already in main thread, we don't need async? It doesn't.
But in order to know that, you would have to read the documentation, let's say. You would have to know that, oh, in the initializer of that class, I can pass a queue that then it
This is how we started your presentation. I thought that you were going to answer this question.
yeah. Oh no, like I'm just saying that's there's no solution to that problem. There is none. SSC introduces a solution to that problem by introducing the main actor attribute, which forces the runtime to context switch to the main thread with a simple attribute. You are declaring, right? It's a difference between imperative programming and declarative programming. You are declaring that that method or that class, everything inside it needs to execute the main actor. And you only have to write one line, and it's local to the file. You don't have to imperatively redispatch every single thing that happens. You can just declare it, and the compiler takes care of injecting all the steps to make sure it's
Just
executed.
a matter of coding, right? The code you think becomes shorter. That's the only thing. You don't save time.
Yeah, but-
you don't make it more efficient. It doesn't do that.
It's also
Just-
safer
just
because the
coding.
compiler ensures that if you write something at main actor, there will be checks that if you are in an async context calling into a main actor, right? So let's say you are, I'm just going to go up. I'm just going to show that, right? Like, let's look at that. That class, obviously, like the @main actor attribute tells, actually, I'm going to show this one. The @main actor attribute tells, by the way, make sure that this runs on the main actor. That's already great. But also, it ensures that the caller knows that it's on the main actor. So you're going to have a guaranteed transact, but then it also knows, okay, well, if the caller is already on the main actor, the compiler will know that, and it will say, okay, you don't need to add a wait, because you are executing on the same actor context. So it can be actually a synchronous call because you are staying on the same actor. So there's actually like, whereas if you're not on the same actor, it will say, no. You are calling an async function. You need to call a wait here. It's an asynchronous operation. You have to add a wait. So it gives you guarantees as well to make sure the caller has to be in a asynchronous context, which it's a viral thing which makes sure that you're always in a proper context all the way through the call
By
chain.
the way, what is the difference between async and no async? First case and the
Because the top one is just like I'm starting the task inside the function, so I'm really like spawning a task at this point. The function itself doesn't need to be async. I'm just creating the task inside there, but you can basically have that syntax. It's as an attribute of the closure itself. Oops.
Nobody saw that on YouTube.
You got to hit play. That was great. Thanks, Renault. Once again, Renault has validated my laziness and by not using this stuff before Swift 5.7, so that's good. From one tricky subject to a subject that is very simple and never goes wrong and never has any complexity, continuous delivery with Luke. Here we go.
Excellent. Thanks for that introduction. So, hi everybody. My name's Luke Sleeman. You might have seen a bit more of me at the GDG than at CocoaHeads. I'm a principal developer working for a company called Itty Bitty Apps. And for the past couple of years, I've been contracted out to work with ANZ, helping them deliver their new ANZ Plus application. And tonight, I'm going to talk about continuous delivery at ANZX, the program that's built this application. And because continuous delivery sounds dreadfully dull, I've subtitled it, How We Go From a Pull Request to Out in a Customer's Hands in 5 Days. Before I jump in and start talking about continuous delivery, I wanted to provide a little bit of context. For more than the past 2.5 years, we've been working with ANZ to help them build out their new ANZ Plus application. And it's got all kinds of exciting features, both from a technical and a user perspective. All the way back in May, Rob Amos, aka Bok, one of the CocoaHead regulars, presented on its architecture here at CocoaHeads Melbourne. So if you want to hear all about the architectural principles that underpin the app, such as offline data cache with idempotent synchronization, unidirectional data flow, and eventual consistency, I'd really encourage you to head off to the CocoaHeads video channel there and watch the presentation. It should give you a lot more background on what we are about. Since that talk, we've hit some really exciting milestones, such as more than $500 million of funds under management and over 40,000 customers, with thousands more joining every week. We've also released a stream of new features such as increased daily payment limits, Google Pay integration, BPay, Pay ID, dynamic CCVs, and so on. Delivery is rapid. On average, it's 2.5 days from a pull request being raised until it's merged in. Both of our apps are being released automatically to the stores twice a week. So far, we've had over 260 releases of both the Android app and the iOS app. And the average time from a pull request being merged until it's out in a customer's hands, managing that money on a real phone, is 3 days. So when you add it all up, on average, and there definitely are some outliers out there with RPRs, but on average, it's 5 business days from a PR being raised until it's out in the customer's hands, running on the phones, but, big caveat, hidden behind feature flags, of course. Now, we didn't start out the program with a grand plan to hit these kind of numbers. Our initial goals in terms of delivery were a lot more modest. We just wanted to try releasing the app once a fortnight and see what broke, and then fix that up, and then try and go a little bit faster and see what broke next. And by continually iterating and focusing on what was holding us back and slowing us down, and what was breaking when we tried to go faster, we've settled on 4 pillars of continuous delivery. These are the things that allow us to move quickly. Firstly, we try and automate everything that we can. And there are 2 main areas that we focus on. Firstly, we use automation to provide quality assurance and security. So we have a whole bunch of automated unit tests, UI tests. We do a release archive test. So on every branch, we build the complete version of the production app that would go out and be deployed. There's a whole bunch of linting, compliance checks, SonarQube, Black Duck, check marks. These are all security checking things. And we perform automated compliance checks using a tool called Sizzle. But secondly, we also use automation to remove repetitive processes, which increases our speed and reduces mistakes. So we auto-generate release notes. And we also use automation to produce many of the artifacts required by ANZ's change management process. Our second pillar is no long-lived branches. Some of you in the audience may be very familiar with this diagram. It's called Git flow, and it's a popular strategy for branching using Git, including things like release branches, hotfix branches, and so on. And we don't use it. We find it adds a lot of complexity, particularly around things like cutting release branches, backporting bug fixes, and so on. And we find it isn't suitable for our rapid continuous delivery process. Instead, we have many short-lived branches, all of which get merged back into main. Each branch should only be open for a few days, and it should contain a small, manageable chunk of code which gets merged via that pull request. So how can we be continually merging our code back into main and then shipping it out directly to our users when it's out on these phones managing real money? How can we do this safely? To do this, we make extensive use of feature flagging. When a new feature is built, it's hidden behind a feature flag. And we use a product called Launch Darkly, which you can see there on this slide, to manage all of the flags and remotely enable them when a feature is ready to be released. Hiding new code behind feature flags allows us to merge and ship without that fear that incomplete features will be exposed to our users. To allow us to enable features for testing by developers or our QA people, we also have a companion app, which you can see there on the right, which we install alongside the developers. Testers install alongside the main ANZ Plus application. And it allows us to override those flag values and enable features under development. On iOS, all of this is done using a framework called Vexel, developed again by Bock, which he has presented here before at CocoaHeads. All of this feature flagging means that releasing new features is now decoupled from deploying builds into the app stores. And we've been able to move a lot of heavier processes around things like legal approvals and marketing and so on, are shifted from when we deploy the app to when a feature flag is enabled. And by allowing us to turn those feature flags on and off at any time, it removes some of the stresses and pressures on the developers. They're not rushing really hard to get a feature done for this particular month's release or so on. We can turn features on when they're ready. Our last pillar of continuous delivery is consciously shifting as many of our processes to the left so that they happen earlier. In particular, we're focused on quality assurance and testing because we find the earlier that you find issues and bugs, the simpler they are to fix. Shift left also means that you'll see a lot of things happening in our pull requests. The first thing that you notice when looking at our pull requests is lots of automated testing and quality gates. All those things like our unit tests, our UI tests, the linting, the checking for security issues get run on every pull request before it's merged. Secondly, we also have a lot of manual testing. Each pull request should come with a test plan which is written by the developer raising that pull request, often with input from their QA person. The test plan is typically executed by the other developers who are reviewing that pull request. Having our developers run the test plan means that they can look at the code from many perspectives, including, most importantly, what it actually does when you run it. Because I find personally too often when I'm looking at pull requests, we tend to focus on the style of the code alone. It can be really hard to see the forest for the trees there. The test plan in the pull request helps counteract this tendency by forcing people to focus on what the code actually does when you run it, and also helps us to find problems early. Detailed reviews also require a lot of context, so don't bother trying to squint or read this stuff. You're not meant to be reading it, but each pull request will have an extensive description, which often includes things like screenshots and videos. And all of this leads to a lot of discussion in pull requests. And we don't it does have a limit, but we don't necessarily see this as a bad thing at all. Code is at the core of what we are doing. So it makes sense that an engaged team will spend a lot of time discussing it. Pull requests are about how we learn and grow as a team and how we ensure the code that we're about to deploy is correct. So every time somebody writes a comment on a pull request, not only does the product get better, but we also grow and learn as a team. So you might all be thinking like, wow, I bet all of this stuff takes a lot of time. Setting up all of that automation, all of those pull request reviews, that conversation, that discussion, which gets us to a bit of a bonus pillar, or maybe it's more of an underlying principle. Go slow to go fast. And you might be thinking, hold on a second, Luke. Don't you go fast to go fast? Haven't you got that round backwards? The problem with trying to speed up and go fast is it doesn't get you very far. If you want to go faster and cut things out, there's always some meetings you can cut out and a few processes you can cut back on. But if you try and hurry up and go fast, you really quickly run out of those low-hanging fruit. And then you start doing things like cutting corners on your code or putting off investment in automation. You start shortchanging your pull requests and you just get them approved with, oh, looks good to me. And you think to yourself, oh, look, I'll fix all of that up when the pressure is off. Except somehow that pressure never really does come off, does it? And all of those corners you've cut keep on adding up. And suddenly it turns out that you're actually going really slow. So we don't do this. Instead, we deliberately go slow to go fast. This is all about investment. Every time somebody slows down their work, by taking the time out to automate something, it speeds all of us up. Every time we stop and invest our time in having a detailed discussions in those pull requests, it speeds the whole team up. And these investments have a way of compounding over time. This is not an easy way of going fast, but it's a powerful one that gives you a significant advantage. So if you take one thing away from my talk tonight, I hope it is this principle: go slow to go fast. Do we have any questions? I'm happy to take them either here in person or in Slack in the Meetup channel.
A bit of a silly question, but did any customer ever complain that there are too many updates?
Do customers ever complain there are too many updates? Oh, that is a really good question. I don't think we've quite hit that point yet, but it is true that you can push things out too much and users get sick of the constant app updates downloading in the background. I think it's a bit of a balance between deploying things frequently to the store and just overwhelming them with those updates. I know on Android, a lot of that stuff tends to happen very much in the background now when your phone's charging overnight. On iOS, does it sort of push you pretty aggressively and let you know when updates are happening?
Yeah, there's an automatic update process as well. It's kind of janky, but it's fair.
Yeah. Any further questions?
You talked about the short releases and pushing features, and I know at least one project that I've worked on, and I think you might have worked on it at the same time, where Apple actually said you can't use this framework unless it's a released feature. When that eventually comes up for you, do you see a way that you're, like, how would you see something like that problem being fitted into your process?
Now I'm really out of my depth with answering that question, because I am not an iOS developer and I am not around the iOS side of things. We do have a few there in the audience. Amy, do you...
No comment. But I did have another question to move on from that. So, with a team as large as ANZ is, how do you keep everyone on board with the process and sort of satisfy all of the different requirements going on?
Ooh, that is a great question. It's like, how do we keep everybody on board with the process and satisfy all of the requirements that are going on? It's really, really hard. Really, 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 really hard. I think there's two aspects of that question to really break it down. One part of it is the engineering team and the developers and keeping everybody on the same page there around what we're doing. And there's a lot of things we've got in that space to try and keep everybody aligned. Part of this is all automated. Like, we lean heavily into automation. So things like having all of those checks run on your pull request, using the same pull request templates and so on are kind of not like opt out. It's just going to happen by default for everybody. Part of this is sort of a self-correcting thing that we have within the culture at ANZ, where if somebody's like moving away from this, other developers will talk to them and explain things and pull them up, and people get rewarded for the team's very good at acknowledging good work and calling out things that we think really fit well with our vision for what we're doing. We've also got very extensive documentation, and we're also very keen to change and update our process as well. We need to be continually evolving and growing and changing. This thing that we got here didn't come fully formed into being. It only happened because we continually looked at what was holding us back. So if developers within the team are seeing things that like aren't right or causing problems or could be done better, that's great. We should bring it up and discuss it and find ways that we can move quicker. So we've got all of those things going on within the engineering team. But the mobile engineers also work within a larger team at ANZX. There's lots of other things going on apart from the mobile app being built. And getting that alignment across the other areas of the business so that they can understand what we're doing and why we're doing it has also been a really, really challenging thing, and something that's still an ongoing piece of work. The ANZX program at the moment has, like, I think over 900 people in it, so getting them all on the same page is hard. Ultimately, it comes down to just going out and having lots and lots and lots of conversations with people, but also asking our engineers and developers to be advocates for this process so that when it comes up in conversations with product owners and so on, that they can explain why we're doing it and how it fits together. Renaud?
You said that a PR tends to sit for like a couple of days before it's reviewed. How do you ensure that? Is it cultural, or are there processes that say, you know what, if a PR sits languishing over 3 days, it becomes like a high priority target? So how do you ensure that that PR doesn't become lost for like a month and nobody wants to review it? Because that's common.
Yeah, lots of ways. It's a continual problem. One of the metrics that we're tracking and looking at, and I know Kira's been looking at very closely, is the time to first comment, how long it takes from a PR's raised till somebody's actually looked at it and commented on. And that is one thing that we want to get low, because as developers, there's nothing worse than pouring your heart and soul into this code, putting it out there to the world, and just absolutely getting crickets. Although pull requests have been a continual challenge because a lot of things go on in there, and many of us are used to smaller teams where it is really quick and easy to get a pull request merged in, and we are getting good to me reviews. And people don't realize that while our pull request process takes a lot longer and is a lot more extensive, the overall process that it sits within of going from the code is raised to on a customer's phone is much shorter and faster, and part of that is because we're investing so much effort into the pull requests. But given that, we still want to reduce developer friction. It's not enough to say, oh, it's just going to take a while, that's the way things are. So there's a lot of things that we can do in that area. One thing that we've done on the Android team and we're trialing on iOS is auto-assigning pull requests. We talk a lot about how we can get better at pull requests, both from a raising pull requests and a reviewing them perspective. We have many catch-ups across both the iOS and Android team each week, where one of the regular agenda items is, are there any pull requests there that need to be looked at? Let's go through the queue. We use labels to give things like high priorities, and another area that seems to have paid off really well is every morning we'll have a casual huddle in Slack where we go through and do paired review, or like a shared review of pull requests. So if your PR isn't getting any attention or you want extra input, you can always bring it along to the huddle or kick off that huddle and ask other people to come along and review it, and in turn review other people's work as well. Got a question over at the back there?
Yeah, I apologize if the question's already been answered, but I guess my question is on the other side of how do you make sure pull requests don't stay around for too long? Like if it's been longer than 2 days, 3 days, and you've got a lot of pull requests, I can imagine like just gets lost in like a month later, or near the bottom of the interface, it's like, oh, it's random.
Yeah, things languishing at the bottom of the queue can be a problem. Ultimately, it comes down to two things, right? It comes down to the developer who raised the pull request being responsible for going out there and engaging the rest of the team, and if it is languishing, bringing it up in all of those processes, bringing it to the huddles, raising it up to other people asking for reviews. But it also comes down to the team and the team as a whole to make sure those things don't happen. So one of the things that we do is when we get together as a team weekly, we look through the queue occasionally and we will check what's going on down the bottom. Or sometimes the queue size does grow too large and we'll get together and have a conversation about it and say, what's leading to this? Why are there things languishing down at the back? How can we do better? And it's all about that process of continually improving and looking at where you can do better and what's holding you back. So to answer your question, how do we make sure things don't languish? Sometimes they do, but ultimately it comes down to the dev and it comes down to the team to notice that, to self-correct and make sure it doesn't happen again. Any further questions? I guess not. If there are any in the Slack channel, I'll take them in there. Thanks a lot, everybody.
Cool. Okay, thanks, Luke. That was really good. I loved all that. I agree with all of that. I love slowing down to speed up. It's one of my favorite things to harp on about. We use a piece of, this is kind of a question relating to that talk. We have a thing that we use at work called Robin, which is like a round robin thing. So you can either allocate a pull request or assign a pull request to someone, or you can assign it to Robin, to the round robin, and this bit of software will assign it pseudo-randomly to someone, but it does something to keep, I can't remember how it works, but it does something to keep it fair and allocates to people. And I'm not sure if we open sourced that, but if we did, I'll send it on to you because it could be useful. We find that useful as a way of kind of spreading the workload of general pull requests that are not, because sometimes you know who you want to do your pull request, and sometimes it could be anyone. So yeah, that was great. Thanks, Luke. Okay, how to introduce Fletch for this one? I don't actually know what's going to happen here. I think this might be just a lot of very pretty pictures of the Spanish countryside, so we'll see. That'll be nice. Fletch is going to talk to us about NS Spain.
I'm out of practice. Here we go. Let's see. There you go. Is that good? Yeah. All right. Okay, cool. All right.
Bring back the car. It looked good.
There is actually a car in this. So this is just something I put together. I thought I'd share. I was lucky enough to get to NS Spain last month by pitching to my boss to say I really wanted to go, and it was a conference, and I've been trying to hire for a while. I thought it was good to tap into a new pool of community. But I was lucky enough to get to NS Spain, and thought I'd let you know about it. It's more of a journey than a pure conference. Anyone that doesn't know me, Michael Fletcher, work at Home Delivery Service. Pat's on my team. We make various apps and system for delivery. So as a bit of an introduction, I'm sure you all know where Spain is, but it was quite a long journey. I chose to bounce through Middle East, end up over in Madrid, because the conference is located in this little place called Logrono. Smallish city, certainly not one of the capital cities in Spain. Main topic there is wine, because that's the major production aspect of this little area, the Rioja area, and I forgot to a talk about NS Spain is pointless if there's not wine involved, because it is a very major part of the conference. Personally, I'm a bit of a researcher when it comes to any sort of travel. Multiple ways to get there. You can bounce out of Barcelona, Madrid, or if you're in Europe, you can come through Bilbao. Again, it's one of those things you need to plan. Train travel over there is not too bad. You can get there in kind of 4 hours from Barcelona on a train, 4 hours-ish from Madrid. Train travel in Europe is fantastic for anyone that hasn't done it. Personally, I did a little bit more research and discovered that over in Bilbao there was a fantastic exhibition that I thought, if I'm going all that way and travelling 24 hours on a plane, why not an extra hour and a half to see a side trip. Don't know how many people have been to this area. I happen to have been there before. Fantastic museum designed by Frank Gehry, which is totally covered in very thin titanium shingles with an enormous flower puppy out the front. But I had to go there purely because there was an amazing exhibition that just happened to be on for one more week after the conference of limited edition vehicles from the 1930s, 40s and 50s. I don't know if anyone's as into this as I was, but when it comes to design and spectacular prototypes, it was quite beautiful. But moving right along, in the end I got to the conference after that 4 or 5 hour stopover. NS Spain's been going for 10 years now, or it's 10th edition, 8 plus 2 because 2 were remote. I don't think the conference would be as meaningful being remote, because it's certainly, it's a hell of an event. It's really designed around its culture, its friendliness, so many aspects. Hosted by 2 individuals, Louis and Bora. They take this on board, they work a full-time job, they take this on, they get their family to help, because it's not even where they live. I think one comes from Barcelona, I'm not sure where Bora comes from, if he's Madrid, I think. But yeah, it's both a travel for them to get there. While I was there, I was often asking people where you're from. The kind of countries people coming from were wide and far afield. Being people that do code, everyone seems to speak English, because you kind of need to speak English to write code. So it wasn't so intimidating that being in Spain wasn't going to be in Spanish. Everyone spoke English, so that was great for me. It's quite a crowd. It sold out, I think, about a month, 5 weeks before the conference, before they had even announced any speakers. They kind of didn't need to announce speakers because it's got such a reputation for being such a fantastic event. A bit like WWDC, you know, they don't announce half the sessions. Well, they announced the sessions and the speakers 1 week before the conference, well and truly after everything was sold out. The schedule of events there is, day one they have some workshops. Day two is talks, and it's a pretty solid day. It starts early in the morning, goes through till kind of 6, 7 at night. The interesting bit is they have the after party after day two, not after day three. And it's quite an after party. And then again, day three talks. And just because it's Spain and based around wine, optional day four is when the whole wine festival starts. The whole town comes alive. Tens of thousands of people come from all over Spain and all over the world, and a wine festival starts. It's quite berserk. But getting down to actually the content of the conference, and the videos are all online. They come up online roughly a week and a half after the conference. Christoph kicked it off, and it was a gutsy kick-off because he was talking about composable architecture at scale, and the two authors of composable architecture were sitting right there in the front row, right in front of him, which was intimidating to be able to talk about someone's architecture while they're sitting in front of you, but he handled it beautifully, and really talked about how it works. It's one thing to design a framework, but to do it at scale in enterprise, it's a very different thing, and you know, pitfalls and things. Great talk. So I just thought I'd give you a bit of a run through some of the talks, because if you are getting the opportunity to watch some of them, it's such a diverse mix of talks. Michael was, I don't know if any of you know this book that came out recently about app icons. Extremely passionate individual about design and about apps. He spent, I think, 3-4 years putting this book together. The challenge is about trying to get copyright, and some of the great favourite app icons that now don't exist anymore, trying to find them, artwork, get people to sign off copyright was quite a challenge for him. I think he sold out the first edition. He's gone back for a reprint. Very passionate individual about presenting about app icons and the history of them. Brandon, he was one of the last talks, and talking about the Swift UI navigation stack, really doing some great coding on the fly about what you can make it do, pushing it, and pushing it in the end to be able to do routing through a navigation stack. JP, this was an intriguing one. He's at Lyft and talking about what can go wrong with network stack. It's all kind of horror stories that none of us hopefully have to deal with, but intriguing nonetheless. Adam's at Netflix, and this is a very UI-based one as well. He basically took a great start of an app, or just a screen of an app, saying, here it is, start with, we toy with it, this is what it does. Now, what can we do that's really simple to interact with it, to make it a nicer experience? A couple of simple things, some live coding, and it was just amazing to see it went from something totally bland, simple, to something interactive and playful, with just a little bit of code movement. This one intrigued me as well. GoodNotes, you know, popular iOS app, has been around for a while, trying to reuse Swift code using WebAssembly. To me, blew my mind that they would even go down that track. Interesting, very interesting. This is one of the most humorous ones. Matthias was comedian on stage, a passionate Italian individual. I got up there in his boxer shorts to give the talk, talking about SoundCloud, giving a really good appraisal of the architecture and the complexity, and how that interacts with moving to Swift UI. Humorous talk, very honest about, you know, architectural decisions that they'd made and how that creates complexity. Otto was there as well. A lot of you might know of Otto because he created I wrote CocoaHeads there. That was the wrong thing to write. What am I looking for? The word is CocoaPods, yes. So a bit of a history wrap-up of 10 years CocoaPods, and why decisions were made in the way they were. It was a really honest, appraisal of a lot of the work that he'd done. But intriguingly, he said that CocoaPods is actually busier than it ever has been, not so much from the iOS community, but from the Android community, which is kind of interesting. But yeah, just giving a really honest look back of if I'd done this different, or would I have chose to do this differently in different context. So all the videos are up there now, which is great to see. And I put this up as the glass half empty, half full. It's one thing to kind of watch the videos, but it's really only half the conference. The ability to talk to all these people, everyone makes themselves extremely available. 350 odd people at a conference, it's small enough but big enough. I found myself sitting in the audience chatting to people and then discovering they're getting up on stage for the next talk. And, oh, you're that guy. Oh, I didn't even realise. But everyone's just so up for a chat. I suppose they've all travelled there. They've all come away from home. No one's involved in having to get home to children or anything like that because everyone's on a journey. So everyone was just a delight to chat to. But as I said, it's not just a tech conference. They've got a great Slack channel, and pretty much as you arrive there, everyone's chatting on Slack. I just happened to be down this laneway, and funnily enough, in a little town of Spanish people, it's not that hard to notice who's the developer that's travelled to get there. I don't know what it is, but hey, it's not that hard to spot a group of developers. But it's a beautiful town to visit, vibrant food, the environment there amongst the wineries, the after party kind of goes berserk. They have buses, they pick everyone up, take them to a winery, etc. Even lunch, being Spain, everything's a long lunch, wine, etc. But everyone's just up for a chat. It's just a beautiful event. And as the one more thing here, the day after the conference, as I mentioned, the wine festival starts, and they literally launch a rocket from the town square, and the whole party starts. I was amazed at the amount of people that come to this town, and there's all guys from the conference. They're all participating as well, and it's always also a good time for a chat and get to know everyone. It was amazing event. I'm so glad I went, and I would encourage anyone if they feel like to travel. Travel's back on again now, and anyone need any advice on getting there, I'm up for it. So that's about all I have to share with you.
Any questions?
So you've got a bottle of wine sitting there.
I am prepared to open it if anyone wants to share it with me.
Tasting notes?
I haven't bought this one before. I bought it on the way here. I had a really nice couple of bottles I brought back from Spain with me, but I wasn't prepared to bring them with me.
Are you disappointed? I was so looking forward to a bottle from Spain.
It's from Spain. It's from the region. I just didn't bring it in my suitcase. I was a bit paranoid to bring him in my suitcase. No, that's not the one more thing.
So just adding something, sorry, not a question, but just to add my 2 cents. I've been to a lot of conferences, and you go to big cities, Tokyo, whatever, and it's great. But the distinct thing about really in Spain, and I guess you went to it, is like it's a fairly small town. It's like probably 10, 20,000 people. Everything is at a walkable distance. So really, once you get there, you're in it. And you go to a conference. The conference center is just a few minutes walk from the center of the city, which is the old city. Once you're done with the talks, everybody just starts walking to the old city and hangs out in the tapas bar.
Yeah, it's not like San Francisco where everyone's spread amongst 50 different hotels all over town. Everyone's, it's...
So you really need to emphasize the fact that it's a small city, and so it becomes very brotherly, where you see everybody, like even when you lose people, you start walking around the neighborhood and in streets, like, oh, I meet this guy again. Like, you know, you cross people all the time. So the fact that it's a small city is so nice. It's very different from all the other conferences that tend to do in big cities where you lose people as soon as you get a step out of the conference center. So, yeah, like you said, right? Half of the conference is in the conference center, and half of it is outside, and it's so
Refreshing.
enjoyable
Yeah,
and,
yeah. To be able to have those discussions around architecture, about resourcing people, you know, because it's been, you know, COVID, now things are back. It's those aspects of, you know, working with teams remotely, and they're not the sort of discussions that are easy to have over Slack, but it's so easy over a glass of wine or 6 glasses of wine out in the town square at midnight. And yeah, people are very sharing with their experience and knowledge. It was just, yeah, beautiful melting pot.
And that's why I believe, right, and Spain is so special because Luis and Borja managed to create something so special, right? They managed to get hundreds of people, hundreds of iOS developers all over the world to go in that very small town, respectively, in the middle of Spain, to share like a few days. And like, I don't think there's any other conference quite like it.
Yeah.
Just by reputation, people just flock to it. And so, yeah, like, again, I recommend going to it. But, you know, again, talking to Luis when I was there, he really hinted that he never wanted to become bigger than this. He could probably like rent a bigger conference center, go to Barcelona, Madrid, or whatever. He's like, no, I just want 200-300 attendees, a few good talks, and a few good days exactly in that specific town. That's what I want to keep on doing. So it's a very special conference just for that, and it's amazing that it exists. And yeah, it's probably to my mind, it's the best conference to attend in the iOS world.
Yep.
There's some great conferences in the iOS community as well, but in Spain it's just like you have to live through it one time in your life.
I met some people from Argentina that are planning a similar conference there, taking notes, and again, one in Poland that's working on, I can't think of the name of that one. But anyway, yeah, they were taking notes to go, yeah, we need to do this because it's a whole experience.
So the one in Poland, was that MobiCon?
No. Something like PL Swift. Yep. I think it's going to be a first time, maybe second time. Yep. And yeah, everyone's on Slack, and it's like I needed a lift back to Bilbao to get my flight, and it was actually the creator of the Poland conference that said, yeah, no worries, I'm driving back with my girlfriend, you know, come here, you know, pick me up in town square. So it was just such a community.
How about accommodation? We just got problem with accommodation.
It's very inexpensive. Being Spain, you know, you could find a hotel for $80 to $100 a night if you need one.
Isn't enough room in such a small town for everyone?
No, I suppose unlike San Francisco, when there's a conference hall in town, it's hard to get hotels and they're ridiculously expensive. The only hard thing was because the wine festival started on Saturday, accommodation on Saturday night's expensive or hard to get unless you book ahead. I was crazy. I booked 3 weeks ahead. So, yeah, if I'd planned ahead, and I would encourage anyone going, plan ahead, just go.
There's an American brand name hotel that's near the conference center. I forget which one it is. Do you remember? Is it Hilton or something like that?
What is this about?
The Marriott's like, yeah, 5 minutes walk. Yeah, that's where I
What
stayed.
NSPX stand for? Do you know?
It's just NS, you know.
Next step.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
It's for Microsoft users or.
It's in general, it's, you know, Apple-ish development community. Yeah, most of it's kind of iOS-ish, a bit like us all here.
Whereas MobiCon, which is in Poland about 2 to 3 weeks later, covers both tracks. There's both Android
Yeah, there's not 2 tracks in this, it's just single track. So yeah, that makes it nice and easy.
Thing. You don't have to make any decision.
Yep.
You just sit there.
Thank you.
Very nice, thank you. Okay, great stuff. Thanks, Fletch. I love that going to small places. Reminds me of NSConf in the UK, used to be in Leicester. And it's the same sort of thing, like no one would, why would you ever go to Leicester? But stick a conference on there, people go, oh, they love the town. It's lovely, it's a really nice thing to do. And we got some nice pictures of Spanish countryside, which I love because I miss Spain. So that's us for the night. Thanks to our sponsors again, Itty Bitty Apps, Dias and Deloitte Digital. Don't forget, we have drinks night on the 25th of October, and next week we have the hack night, back for the first time. And now we get to go to the pub. I don't actually know what that Japanese says, but I just kind of like it, so I'm just going to leave it there.
Oh, that's interesting. Do you know what it comes as? Ah, it's your name, right?
It's not mine. No, it's not mine. That was left on from like a couple of meetups ago. What does it say? It just says let's go drink. Cool. Yeah, fair enough. Okay, let's go drink. Thanks everyone.